Yusef, Bunchy, Shakur.
What up, though? After I was born, my mother had shared with me, you know your grandmother, Minnie, wanted me to have an abortion. My mother was 15 years old. My father's mother, Mary, had told me, boy, I had went on the radio to make a plea for you to be born. And I asked my mother, was that true? Yeah, she did it. But it had no bearings in me giving birth to you. You was my baby, and I was going to have you regardless. My grandmother, Minnie, had one request in giving my mother her blessing. Ava Joe, I want you to name that boy Hope, as in hope like hell he don't turn out like his daddy. My father was 17 years old, and I only had seen him maybe 5 or 6 times, and I turned just like out like my daddy. From that struggle, me and my mother had developed a credible bond, and it only got stronger with the absence of my father. And I remember my mother telling me, when you was born, he had denied you and went off to the Navy. But my father's version was, I went off to the Navy so I can take care of you and your mother. And every other man that my mother dated after that had abused her. And I remember vividly as a little boy watching my mother being abused and thinking to myself, I wish I was bigger so I can kick their ass. But my mama wasn't no punk, though. Ava Joe, I'm home, he yelled. And the response was gunshots. You see, this man that put his hands on my mama one too many times. And the word on the street was, she shot him in the stomach with his own gun. You see, my mama had little education, so she relied on her sheer will and beauty to take care of me and my 2 sisters. You see, the guy she dated was involved in the streets. So she became involved in the streets as well. So I remember a time I was over a friend's house, and she had been gone a week. And when she came and got me, I'm here, baby. I ran and gave my mother a hug, and she gave me a bag of toys. You see, when I walked out my house and I sat on my porch, I had a front row seats to watching gangsters, hustlers, dope dealers, and dope users. To them, I was Ava Joe's son, the little red-haired little boy that wasn't scared of nothing. You see, fighting had become my sport that I was known for. JoJo, come here, one of the big homies said. I bet you can't beat that boy over there. And I fought him with all my heart to prove to him my worth, because I looked at him as a father figure. I started running with guys that was older than me, and we did a lot of mischievous things, breaking in stores, stealing, and fighting. And I began to test my mother's authority. And she had that one rule. I had to be home before the street lights come on. And I remember her coming looking for me. Boy, ain't I told you about letting those street lights beat you home? Now you gonna make me beat you with this baseball bat for letting those street lights beat you home. At the age of 9, I would be arrested for breaking and entering. And during this time, my relationship with my father would be reduced to broken promises. And I remember sitting on the porch when my mother asked me, why is you looking so ugly, boy? Mama, I'm waiting on my daddy. And she replied, ain't I told you I'm your mama and daddy? A year later, she would share with me, your daddy's in prison. And I took it with stride. You see, as the pressure began to mount on my mother's shoulder, she began to drink, to cope. As she formed this addiction to alcohol, I began to form an addiction to the streets. And when my mother would discipline me, it would be after she had been drinking. So those ass whippings was more like beatings. And they was like gasoline fueling my anger and rage. And the streets became my outlet for my anger and rage. So by the age 13, I co-founded a gang in the city of Detroit. By the age 15, I had been kicked out of every Detroit public school and a bona fide street guy. And the violence that I was involved in the streets followed me home. Go see who's that knocking on my door like he's a fool. My mother yelled. Who is that? Who is that? I yelled. And as I opened the door, it was gunshots. You see, one of my rivals had came to settle a beef at my house with me. And my mother realized from that day that I was possibly going to get killed or kill someone. And she made a decision only a mother would make. She made me a ward of the state. And I remember asking her, why, Mama? And she replied simply, to save you from yourself, my son. I went away for 15 months. And when I came home from the training school, I was still unsure of myself. And I remember a teacher asking me, what do you think about going to college? And I responded with no hesitation. I would love to go to college. But when I went home that night and that question began to play in my mind, what do you think of going to college? It scared the hell out of me. Because at 17, I didn't know what college was. But I know I didn't want to go back to the streets. So out of my fear, I tried to kill myself. I took some pills. My mother found me and called 911. When I came home from the hospital, I renewed my marriage to the streets. But it would be short-lived because I would be arrested and convicted, not for any of the dumb shit I did, but for a crime I didn't even do. So on my way to prison, I reasoned three things. My father was there, I had enemies there, and I wouldn't be anybody's punk. My mother visited me shortly after I got there. And I remember her telling me, son, I can't take this ride again. It hurts my heart too much to see you caged in here like an animal. I will send you money and make sure your sisters come visit you, but I can't do it. The prison environment was just like the streets. Gambling, gangbanging, violence. So I fit right in. So my fifth time in the hole for fighting, I decided to write my father. I figured I had nothing to lose. We had the same blood. It had to count for something. Dear Dad, you can see from the address on the envelope, I'm right across the dirt road from you. I've been here a few months, and I know you're probably wondering why I haven't wrote you. I just wasn't trying to hear one of my told you speeches. I got in a few fights with some cows, and I'm ready to stab one of these guys. Show them I ain't nobody's punk. When he wrote me back, I was excited and nervous to read the letter. Dear son, it saddens my heart to hear that you're in prison. I tip my hat off to your mother for raising you by herself without my help. Truth be told, I am ashamed of myself that you followed me to prison. So I would never give you one of I told you speeches. You made a mistake. The question is, what are you going to do with this mistake? Will you learn from it or repeat it? Now you're talking about stabbing somebody. Do you realize that you possibly can add more time on? See, the goal is not to leave worse, but to leave better. P.S. You misspelled envelope, address, and knowledge. If you don't have a dictionary, you need to get one. I would get another letter from one of my homeboys, and it said, "What up, Dad?" And I'm scratching my head, what do you mean, what up, Dad? You know Anky's pregnant, and you're the father, and the baby's due next month. With God being the best planner, a year later, me and my father would be at the same prison. And the first time I seen my father, I was in school, and I looked out the window, and I saw this beautiful, strong black man with locks running the yard. And the first time we saw each other, he looked at me and he said, "Son, the greatest gift that a father can give his child is his precious time. And up to this point, I've neglected you and given you my time. But from this day forward, I will do everything in my power in giving you my time to help rebuild and reshape you to be a man. So when you go home, that you can give your son your time." Me and my father spent 6 months together. And he painted a picture in my mind of the man that I could become. And I grew and developed to be that man. You see, every boy wants to be like their father. And God granted me a second chance to be like my father in a positive way. You see, it'll be 5 years later before we be on the same prison yard again. But this time it'll be short-lived because I was close to going home. And he walked me to the gate, and he looked at me with tears in his eyes, and he said, "Son, it's imperative when you go home that you keep my grandson from coming here. You see, they can keep the lion caged, but the cub must go free. And when the cub goes free, part of the lion goes with him. You see, I face the possibility of not coming out of here. I'm cool with that because God granted me a chance to impact your life, to leave here, to do some great things. And I have faith that you will go home and do those things. I love you, son." I served 9 years in prison, and I've been home 13 years. And my greatest challenge of so many was building a relationship with my son. You see, when I came home, he wasn't looking for Yusef Shakur. He was looking for Zone A JoJo. So to help my son, I had to help myself. I enrolled into college and graduated my associate degree. I got a job as a Head Start teacher, and I decided to pen my first book, The Window to My Soul. So when bookstores wouldn't carry my book, I said, "Fuck you," and opened up my own bookstore. That I ran for 4 years. And I carved out a niche as a speaker that has spoken at Howard, Harvard, Michigan. But I realized all that social prestige means nothing if I can't impact my neighborhood. So I went back in my neighborhood and I organized a backpack giveaway that I do every year for the last 7 years at my mom's house, where each year we give away 500 backpacks filled with school supplies. And since I've been home, I had a second son. And I cried when I watched him come into this world. And there was tears of pain because I didn't experience that with my oldest son. But there was tears of joy of knowing what the experience of fatherhood was like. I've just enrolled into the University of Michigan, Dearborn, to work towards my bachelor's degree. I am working to raise money to rehab a house in my neighborhood to open up as a community center. I'm fortunate enough that God granted me a second chance to help a lot of people realize their first chance. I travel the country being a testimony of hope, transformation, and redemption. My name is Yusef Bunchy Shakur. That means honorable soldier, thankful to God. Peace.
Yusef Bunchy Shakur. What a story.